Elite professor forces a young student to solve a physics problem, not knowing he's a genius. What do you think you're doing in my classroom? Dr. Richard Coleman's voice cut through the lecture hall like a blade. Every eye in the room snapped toward the front. Marcus Johnson, 19, the only African-American student in the front row, sat perfectly still, calm, composed, with a steady gaze that seemed to pierce through Coleman's scowl. The auditorium was tense. 200 students froze mid-note, sensing the confrontation. Coleman's sharp eyes scanned the rows, settling back on Marcus. "I asked what you're doing here," Coleman said again, adjusting his glasses. "This course is for students with exceptional academic records, not for those admitted through quotas." Marcus's voice was clear, unwavering. "I'm here to learn physics, sir." A dry, dismissive laugh escaped Coleman. "Learn physics? Look at this board," he said, gesturing to the equations behind him. "These aren't high school problems. They're not even standard undergraduate problems. You have no idea what you're stepping into." No one knew Marcus's story. Growing up in one of Newark's toughest neighborhoods, he had discovered a discarded physics textbook at age 12. From that day, science became his refuge. Every night, by candlelight or streetlight, he devoured books, journals, and research papers. Physics was his world, a place where curiosity mattered more than background, and brilliance was self-taught. "Maybe we can solve this practically," Coleman said, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Since you're so eager, why didn't you come up and try?" The students exchanged uneasy glances. It was obvious. Coleman had selected a deliberately impossible problem, a quantum mechanics puzzle that even advanced students struggled to solve in hours. This was a test of humiliation, not learning. Marcus hesitated for a heartbeat, then stood. He walked toward the board. Each step measured, the memories of long nights studying flooding back. Candlelight flickering over dog-eared pages. Mockery from classmates who could not understand his obsession. The countless hours spent translating complex math into something that made sense to him alone. "You have 1 hour," Coleman said, glancing at his watch, tone filled with smug satisfaction. "Or until the end of class, if you insist on trying." Marcus picked up the chalk, calm and focused. To him, the symbols on the board were like letters in a secret language, a code that revealed the universe itself. Behind him, Coleman returned to his desk, confident he had cornered the interloper. Marcus tilted his head, studying the equation. "May I use the Coleman-Weinstein method?" he asked politely, referring to a specialized approach Coleman himself had published. Coleman's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" Marcus's hands moved across the board with precision. To the students, it was like watching a conductor orchestrate a symphony, each step perfect and fluid. The chalk traced elegant solutions, lines of logic flowing effortlessly. In the audience, Min, an assistant research fellow, gasped quietly. She recognized the subtle improvisations Marcus was making, improvements even Coleman hadn't seen in his own work. Coleman remained still, his jaw tight. Something about this young man's confidence and clarity suggested a depth of knowledge that defied explanation. Minutes passed. Marcus didn't rush. He didn't panic. Each equation he solved seemed to rewrite the very air in the room, leaving the students and even Coleman uncertain. This wasn't arrogance. It was mastery born from years of dedication and unseen struggle. Finally, Marcus stepped back. The board glowed with a solution that made even the brightest students stare in awe. Coleman leaned in, disbelief painted across his face. "Impossible," he muttered. "You must have memorized this problem." "No, sir," Marcus said simply. "I applied the transformation you published in 2020, with a slight variation that eliminates several intermediate steps." Coleman's face paled. That was one of his most specialized papers, rarely cited, considered esoteric even among academics. And this young man had understood it perfectly. The rest of the class left stunned. Marcus returned to his seat, calm as ever, while whispers filled the room. Today was supposed to be a lesson in humiliation for him. Instead, the reality of Marcus Johnson's genius began to dawn on everyone, especially Dr. Coleman. The lecture hall emptied, leaving a hum of whispered awe and disbelief. Marcus carefully gathered his notes, a calm mask covering the storm of thoughts in his mind. Yet one person remained, Dr. Coleman. He watched Marcus with a mixture of disbelief, irritation, and a hint of fear. "You," Coleman said sharply, rising from his desk. "In my office. Now." Marcus followed, silently. Every step echoed in the quiet corridor of Princeton University's physics building. Students peeked from doorways, sensing something unprecedented was about to unfold. Coleman's office was the epitome of prestige. Polished wood, shelves lined with thick volumes, awards and framed photographs with Nobel laureates, even a signed photo with a former president. And there, behind a gleaming desk, stood Coleman, exuding authority, but now tinged with a rare unease. "Explain yourself," Coleman demanded. "Who taught you to solve that problem? Your file shows a public school background in Newark. No competitions, no awards, no formal accolades. How is this possible?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I taught myself, sir, since I was 12. Books, articles, journals, whatever I could find." Coleman slammed his fist on the desk. "You're being used to humiliate me. Someone is manipulating you. MIT? Harvard? A rival using you to embarrass me? No one is manipulating me," Marcus said evenly, maintaining eye contact. "I can prove my understanding with any other problem you choose." Coleman narrowed his eyes, trying to mask the uncertainty creeping into his composure. "Then, tell me, superstring theory. I want a full analysis. Explain its implications for unifying general relativity and quantum mechanics. 10 pages, equations included, and I expect it by Thursday." "That's impossible without formal guidance." Marcus nodded calmly. "You'll have it by Thursday, sir." Leaving the office, Marcus felt a strange mix of exhaustion and purpose. This confrontation had not been part of his plan, yet he adapted instantly. Over the past 6 months, he had meticulously prepared to enter Princeton, submitting multiple scholarship applications despite repeated rejections. Every setback had been a stepping stone, shaping a plan he executed with precision. That evening, at 7 p.m., Marcus arrived at the university library's quantum physics section, nearly deserted. Waiting for him was May, an assistant familiar with Coleman's inner workings. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked quietly, suspicious of her motives. May glanced around before answering. "Because I know what it's like to be judged by appearance instead of knowledge. Coleman isn't just prejudiced, he's dishonest. 2 years ago, he stole a theory from a doctoral student and published it under his name. The student was expelled when they objected. I have evidence." Marcus absorbed this revelation, a knot tightening in his stomach. "How did you get this information?" "I have access," May said. "I can also track his upcoming work. He plans to publish a revolutionary paper, but it wasn't developed by him. Professor Thompson did it. He passed away before publication." Marcus returned to his small, modest apartment, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. There, hidden beneath a loose board in his closet, were hundreds of notes, journals filled with equations and printed articles. Among them were Princeton's rejection letters. Reading them, Marcus carefully formulated his next move. He sent a formal request to the physics department. Enrollment in Coleman's advanced course under the expanded access program. It was audacious but calculated. Administrative rules would require a formal review, forcing Coleman to publicly justify any denial. Over the next few days, Marcus meticulously prepared his superstring theory essay and studied Coleman's upcoming research using May's information. He discovered plagiarism and fundamental errors, mistakes Coleman failed to notice. Each calculation, each insight added to the quiet but growing storm Marcus was orchestrating. A few days later, in the cafeteria, May approached him again. "Coleman is investigating your background. He thinks you're being manipulated by rivals." Marcus smiled discreetly. "Let him think that." "What are you planning?" she asked, intrigued. "Justice," Marcus replied simply. "Not just for me. For everyone who's been dismissed, ignored, or underestimated." In the neighborhood where he'd grown up, Marcus secretly tutored other bright students, teens with no access to proper education. He taught them physics and mathematics, nurturing a generation of potential that the system had ignored. His plan was bigger than himself. By Thursday, Marcus submitted his essay, 25 pages of original, groundbreaking work on superstring theory, integrating modern particle physics. Coleman received it, flipping through with growing suspicion, then astonishment. "This is unexpected," Coleman muttered aloud. "But you are still an intruder in my class." "Not for long," Marcus replied, calm and unshaken. "Tomorrow, the academic committee will review my formal admission." Coleman waved a dismissive hand, unaware of the deeper forces at play. Marcus had set every piece in motion, and the moment of reckoning was imminent. As the campus settled for night, 2 lights glowed in distant buildings. Coleman frantically reviewed his next big article, unaware that in the second humbler room, Marcus was analyzing the same work and discovering more than just equations. He was uncovering the truth behind years of manipulation and exclusion. The next day, the academic committee meeting would decide more than Marcus's admission. It would challenge the foundations of a system built to limit opportunity based on background, race, and privilege. And Marcus Johnson, 19 and self-taught, was ready. The Princeton University meeting hall was quiet but tense. Light from the tall windows reflected off polished wooden floors, but the atmosphere carried a weight heavier than architecture alone. Faculty members, 6 full professors, and the dean occupied the raised table at the front. Every eye followed Marcus Johnson as he walked into the room, calm, purposeful, yet fully aware of the historical moment he was about to create. "Mr. Johnson requests formal admission to Dr. Coleman's advanced course." Dr. Harris, the chair of committee, announced, her voice firm yet controlled. "Dr. Coleman, I understand you have objections?" Coleman, impeccably dressed in his tailored suit, rose with the confidence of a man accustomed to control. "This young man does not have the necessary qualifications," he stated, his voice carrying authority. His presence would compromise the scientific rigor of this institution. Marcus stepped forward, his posture relaxed, yet commanding attention. "I would like to submit 2 documents for the committee's review," he said evenly. The professors exchanged glances, curiosity sparking in every face. Coleman's frown deepened, sensing the gravity in Marcus's voice. The first folder Marcus distributed contained his essay on superstring theory, a 25-page work connecting advanced quantum mechanics to modern particle physics. He had not only solved a problem, but expanded upon existing theories, demonstrating originality, precision, and the depth of his self-taught knowledge. "This is extraordinarily sophisticated," murmured Dr. Peterson, a specialist in theoretical physics, as he flipped through the pages. The analysis, derivations, and applications, astonishing. The second folder was even more audacious. It contained a comparative analysis of Dr. Coleman's forthcoming major article and the unpublished work of the late Professor Thompson, an accomplished theorist. Marcus had traced identical passages, word for word, equation for equation, highlighting subtle but critical errors that Coleman had failed to notice. "Page 3, paragraph 2, Marcus said calmly, directing attention. "Coleman's derivation mirrors Thompson's manuscript. This section contains a fundamental flaw that would invalidate the theory if published." A deathly silence fell over the room. The committee members flipped through the indicated pages, their expressions darkening as the evidence became undeniable. "That proves nothing," Coleman attempted, his voice strained. "Thompson and I collaborated frequently." Marcus nodded. "Exactly. That's why I included proof on page 7 of the critical error overlooked in the replication. Any physicist truly versed in the material would have recognized it." Coleman's face twisted with rising anger and panic. "Who's behind this? Goldstein? Takahashi? Someone is manipulating this boy." "No one is manipulating me," Marcus replied, his tone unwavering. "I taught myself advanced physics from books salvaged from discarded libraries and journals printed on recycled paper. My knowledge is earned, not inherited or borrowed." He turned to the committee. "I am here not to expose Dr. Coleman personally, but to claim the opportunity one deserves. My ability is equal to any enrolled student, and the proof is in these documents." "Min," the research assistant rose from her seat, "I can confirm everything. As Dr. Coleman's assistant, I have access to the original documents of Professor Thompson. This is not the first time Dr. Coleman has appropriated work. The evidence is clear. Dr. Peterson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, disbelief etched across his face. Coleman, is this true? Coleman said nothing. His silence was a verdict in itself. Marcus placed a flash drive on the table. Here is testimony from 3 additional students, all international and marginalized, who face similar experiences. This corroborates the pattern of misconduct. Dr. Harris leaned forward, her voice resolute. Dr. Coleman, a formal investigation will be launched immediately. As for your request, Mr. Johnson, you are officially accepted into the program with a full scholarship. Coleman's composure broke. You can't do this. I'm Richard Coleman. My name, Marcus interrupted calmly, without arrogance. Your name does not grant immunity. Physics belongs to those who understand it, not those who manipulate it. Coleman lunged forward, rage overtaking decorum, but 2 security guards quickly restrained him. The hall erupted with murmurs and astonishment. Marcus remained calm, serenity radiating from him like the quiet confidence of a master. He understood that this victory was not personal revenge, but a triumph of fairness, justice, and intellect over entitlement and prejudice. From the back of the room, a hesitant clap started, and soon others joined. Applause spread to the hall, a rare chorus of recognition and celebration. Among the audience were students who had been silenced for years, minority students who rarely saw themselves represented in elite academic spaces. In that moment, Marcus realized the magnitude of his impact. His victory was not just about admission. It was a signal that talent, regardless of race, background, or circumstance, deserved recognition and opportunity. The young man from Newark had not only earned his place, but had begun to reshape the very culture of the institution. 3 months later, the main auditorium was packed once more, but this time for Marcus's first official lecture as an assistant professor. Age 19, he walked onto the stage with faculty badge gleaming in the morning light. Welcome to Applied Quantum Physics, Rethinking the Fundamentals, Marcus began, his voice confident, resonating through the hall. Physics does not belong to any race, social class, or gender. It belongs to those with the courage to question, the humility to learn, and the dedication to pursue truth. In the front rows, students from diverse backgrounds watched in awe. Many were young Black, Latino, and minority students who rarely ventured into advanced physics. Among them was Marcus's mother, a nurse who had rearranged her shift to witness her son's historic moment. Meanwhile, the investigation into Dr. Coleman exposed decades of plagiarism and systemic discrimination against minority students. 6 professors were scrutinized, and 2 resigned, unable to defend their legacies. Coleman himself was barred from teaching at prestigious institutions. His name and publications were retracted, and his once untouchable reputation was destroyed. Marcus, however, had transformed the narrative. He turned his Princeton classroom into a hub of collaborative learning, connecting with talented students from underprivileged communities. His first official publication, Democratizing Scientific Knowledge, a model for radical inclusion in theoretical physics, began generating as much attention as his groundbreaking work on superstrings. That day, as he left the physics building, Marcus paused. A small group of students approached him. "Professor Johnson," one whispered shyly, "we formed a study group inspired by your story. Some of us were ready to give up before we heard about you." Marcus smiled. "The greatest obstacle to knowledge has never been ability. It has been the world convincing us that we don't belong. But when you prove your worth, you open doors not just for yourself, but for everyone who follows." That night, Marcus reviewed applications from gifted students across the country, identifying potential talent that had been overlooked. On his desk lay the rejection letters that once barred him from opportunity, reminders that barriers could be dismantled with courage, persistence, and intellect. Marcus Johnson had become more than a professor. He had become a symbol, a catalyst for change in a system that had long resisted it. And as he looked out across Princeton, he understood that the quiet revolution he had begun would echo for generations. The following week at Princeton University marked a new chapter for Marcus Johnson. The campus, usually buzzing with students rushing between classes, seemed almost to pause as news of his official admission and extraordinary lecture spread. In lecture halls, libraries, and dormitories, students whisper about the young prodigy from Newark who had outclassed Dr. Coleman in front of the entire academic committee. Marcus walked across the quad with calm confidence. His backpack was light, filled not with textbooks, most of which he had already mastered, but with the tools of mentorship, notebooks, flash drives, and carefully prepared lesson plans for the students he planned to guide. He had one mission: to prove that intellect and dedication were not confined to elite institutions or elite upbringing, but could thrive anywhere if given the opportunity. He entered his new office, a modest space for Princeton standards, yet vast compared to the small apartment he had studied in for years. A framed photograph of his mother, taken on her last night shift, rested on his desk, a reminder of the sacrifices that had allowed him to pursue this path. Marcus sat down, opened his laptop, and began reviewing applications from gifted students in public schools across New Jersey. These were teenagers like him once, talented, ambitious, but overlooked, dismissed, or told they didn't belong. By late afternoon, his office door opened and Min stepped in. She had been his ally from the start, providing guidance on the inner workings of a university and quietly supporting him against Coleman's influence. "Morning, Professor Johnson," she greeted, smiling. "I've compiled the data on students in our outreach program. Many of them show potential far beyond what standardized tests measure." Marcus leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. "We need to give them more than potential. We need to give them opportunity, access, and mentorship. Knowledge alone isn't enough if the system keeps closing doors." Min nodded, and with the investigation into Coleman underway, "We have a chance to change the system, not just for you, but for everyone affected by him." The investigation was unfolding faster than anyone anticipated. Dr. Coleman's plagiarism, once carefully hidden behind his prestige, had become impossible to deny. The committee discovered multiple instances of misappropriated work from students and international colleagues, alongside years of subtle but persistent discrimination against minority students. Former students began sharing testimonies, describing how Coleman's actions had blocked their academic progression, manipulated their research, or belittled them outright. Meanwhile, Marcus's classes were becoming legendary. Word spread about his approach, not merely teaching equations and derivations, but fostering curiosity, encouraging experimentation, and connecting abstract theory to real-world applications. In applied quantum physics, he challenged students to think critically, debate, and explore ideas collaboratively rather than passively memorize results. One afternoon, during a class on quantum computing, Marcus paused and addressed the room. Physics does not exist in isolation. Every equation, every theory, every derivation has a purpose. It is not enough to understand math. You must understand the implications, the consequences, and how it can change the world. A hand went up. It was Jamal, a student from a nearby public high school who had joined Princeton's outreach program. "Professor Johnson, how do we balance rigor with creativity? Isn't following strict derivations necessary?" Marcus smiled. "Rigor without creativity is blind. Creativity without rigor is chaos. True mastery comes when you can combine both, when rules guide innovation rather than restrict it." As weeks passed, more students began enrolling in Marcus's mentorship sessions. The small, quiet study rooms of the library were soon filled with ambitious young minds scribbling equations, debating hypotheses, and collaborating on experiments. Marcus encouraged remote participation as well, connecting high school students from underrepresented communities via video calls, creating a virtual network that spanned cities and states. While Marcus built his intellectual empire, Coleman struggled to maintain his. The fallout from the investigation was swift and severe. His articles were retracted from major journals. His reputation was tarnished, and his credibility in the scientific community evaporated. No institution of high standing would consider him, and even his smaller teaching positions were scrutinized. What had once been a symbol of authority and intimidation had become a cautionary tale of arrogance and deceit. One evening, Marcus reviewed his lesson plans and noticed a familiar name among scholarship applicants, a student from Chicago whose rejection letter had once reminded Marcus of his own early struggles. Marcus drafted a personalized message, inviting the student to join his study group. "Talent is universal. Opportunity is not. Let's change that together," he wrote. By the end of the semester, Marcus had effectively created a microcosm of equitable scientific learning. Students who had once doubted themselves or who had been told they weren't qualified enough were now contributing innovative ideas and solving problems once reserved for elite scholars. The transformation extended beyond the classroom. Discussions about fairness, access, and mentorship began appearing in faculty meetings and academic journals, influenced by Marcus's work on inclusivity and education. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded. He did not seek fame or personal accolades. His goal was simple yet profound: dismantle barriers and foster talent wherever existed. The story of his confrontation with Dr. Coleman became a legend, not because of the humiliation of a flawed professor, but because it symbolized a larger struggle: the fight for recognition, fairness, and access in a world that often underestimated the extraordinary. At home, Marcus kept a small, private archive of his journey: the letters of rejection, the equations he had mastered in secret, the notes and recordings from his outreach sessions. Each item was a testament to resilience and determination, a reminder of how far he had come and the responsibility he now bore to those who followed. In the distance, Princeton's campus lights shimmered as the day ended. Marcus stepped out, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of history and the promise of the future simultaneously. A quiet revolution was underway, led not by privilege, but by intellect, integrity, and the unwavering belief that brilliance could thrive anywhere when nurtured properly. Winter settled over Princeton, blanketing the campus in a quiet stillness that contrasted sharply with the buzz inside its laboratories and lecture halls. Marcus Johnson's presence had transformed not only the classrooms, but the culture of the university itself. What had started as a single confrontation with Dr. Coleman had evolved into a movement, one that challenged the traditional gatekeepers of knowledge and inspired a new generation of scholars. Every morning, Marcus began his day early, often before sunrise. His office became a hub for students, both enrolled at Princeton and those connected remotely through his outreach program. The virtual network allowed talented young people from underrepresented communities to participate in advanced experiments, discussions on theoretical physics, and problem-solving sessions that rivaled those in the university's laboratories. He named it the Quantum Bridge Initiative, symbolizing connection between brilliance and opportunity, regardless of one's background. One Friday afternoon, the study room was alive with energy. Jamal from Chicago, Aisha from Newark, and several other high school students clustered around Marcus, their laptops glowing as equations streamed across the screen. "Professor Johnson, your latest model predicted particle behavior that contradicts the accepted quantum state for the system," Aisha said, pointing to her simulation. Marcus leaned over, examining the calculations. "Not contradicts," he corrected gently. "It refines. The accepted model assumes uniformity in energy states, but in systems like this one, you must account for probabilistic variations over microsecond intervals. Once we integrate that, the outcome aligns perfectly." The room went silent for a moment as everyone absorbed his explanation. Then Jamal spoke, eyes wide. "So, we just extended the known model by accounting for previously overlooked probabilities?" Marcus smiled. "Exactly. Science progresses by noticing what others ignore, by questioning assumptions rather than blindly accepting them." Meanwhile, Dr. Coleman's fall from grace was nearly complete. The university's investigation revealed decades of ethical violations, favoritism, and misappropriation of research. Articles he had published were formally retracted, his accolades questioned, and his network of influence dismantled. Former colleagues, once hesitant to speak, came forward, recounting instances where his arrogance had obstructed progress or caused irreparable harm to promising young scientists. Coleman's ego, which had once seemed untouchable, became a subject of ridicule in faculty meetings. He had been forced to accept a teaching position at a small community college, far removed from any platform of influence. Even there, students were skeptical of his methods, aware of the scandal, and unwilling to grant him the deference he had long relied on. Back at Princeton, Marcus's influence continued to grow. The Quantum Bridge Initiative expanded to include over 50 students from across the country, each participating in collaborative experiments, research papers, and problem-solving competitions. The virtual labs he had set up allowed these students to manipulate data in real time, share results instantly, and work on projects previously reserved for graduate students or professional researchers. One evening, Marcus reviewed submissions for a paper on quantum computing optimization, a topic he had assigned to a small group of his outreach students. The results astonished him. Not only had the students solved the assigned problem, but they had devised a new algorithm for reducing computational complexity in quantum simulations. Marcus knew this would have significant implications for the field. He prepared a presentation for the upcoming National Physics Symposium, crediting the students fully and emphasizing the power of collaborative learning across socioeconomic barriers. Meanwhile, Marcus maintained his academic responsibilities with meticulous precision. Lectures, office hours, and research consultations were carefully balanced with his outreach commitments. Despite the intense workload, he remained patient, approachable, and consistently encouraging, embodying the principle that true mentorship was about nurturing potential, not asserting dominance. By spring, Princeton had undergone a cultural shift. Students who had once feared or resented the rigid hierarchy of academia now approached their studies with curiosity and confidence. Minority students, in particular, felt empowered, seeing in Marcus a reflection of their own potential. Even faculty members began adopting his methods of inclusivity and active engagement, realizing that excellence flourished when barriers were removed rather than enforced. The day of the National Symposium arrived. Marcus, accompanied by his top outreach students, presented their findings on quantum computational optimization. The audience, consisting of some of the most respected physicists in the world, listened in stunned silence. When the presentation concluded, applause erupted, not just for the breakthrough, but for the collaborative approach that had made it possible. The implications were clear. Brilliance had come from anywhere, and mentorship, access, and opportunity were as important as innate talent. Back at Princeton, Coleman watched footage of the symposium in disbelief. His former student, whom he had attempted to humiliate, had now achieved recognition far beyond anything he had ever accomplished. It was not merely a personal victory for Marcus. It was a vindication of an entire philosophy that had long been suppressed in elite institutions. At the same time, Marcus continued to refine his outreach program. He partnered with high schools, community centers, and libraries, ensuring that students from marginalized communities had access to advanced scientific resources, mentorship, and networks. Scholarships were established, equipment donated, and virtual labs maintained to allow remote participation. Through the Quantum Bridge initiative, dozens of students who had been overlooked by traditional academic pathways were now contributing meaningful research and preparing to enter top universities with the confidence that they belonged there. Marcus's influence also began shaping the culture within Princeton's physics department. Professors who had previously adhered strictly to tradition started to adopt his methods. Collaborative projects, open access to research, and emphasis on mentorship. Even skeptical colleagues recognized that the results spoke for themselves. Students were performing at higher levels, research output had increased, and the department's reputation was growing not because of elitism, but because of inclusivity and excellence. For Marcus, this was the ultimate triumph. The confrontation with Dr. Coleman, the early struggles, and the months of rigorous preparation had all been steps towards something larger than himself. The young man from Newark had not only proven his own genius, but had begun to reshape the academic landscape, dismantling barriers and creating opportunities for countless others. As he walked across the Princeton campus one evening, Marcus paused to watch students leaving the library, discussing theories, equations, and projects. Among them were several of his outreach participants, young minds he had nurtured who now carried the confidence to challenge, question, and innovate. He smiled, realizing that true change was rarely immediate. It was cultivated patiently, nurtured like a garden, and multiplied through those willing to carry the torch forward. And while Dr. Coleman's empire had crumbled under the weight of exposure and accountability, Marcus's vision flourished. He understood that real success in science and in life was measured not by accolades or authority, but by the ability to empower others, challenge injustice, and advance knowledge without boundaries. That night, as Marcus returned to his modest apartment near campus, he opened his laptop and began reviewing submissions for a collaborative research paper on quantum entanglement. The names of students from Newark, Chicago, Philadelphia, and beyond scrolled across the screen. Each represented a story of perseverance, talent, and opportunity. He paused for a moment, reflecting on how far he had come, from reading discarded physics books by candlelight in a cramped apartment to shaping the future of scientific discovery at one of the world's most prestigious universities. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. There were countless other Marcus Johnsons in the world, brilliant minds who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed, and he would find them, guide them, and give them the chance to shine. The quiet determination in his eyes spoke volumes. For Marcus Johnson, genius was not just a mastery of physics. It was a courage to challenge a system built to exclude, the perseverance to overcome obstacles, and a commitment to lift others as you rise. And somewhere in the distance, the echoes of his triumph over arrogance, discrimination, and elitism resonated far beyond the ivy-covered walls of Princeton University. By early summer, Marcus Johnson's influence extended far beyond the walls of Princeton University. The Quantum Bridge Initiative had become a model program, attracting attention from universities, research institutes, and scientific foundations around the world. News outlets and academic journals alike highlighted his approach, not merely for groundbreaking discoveries, but for the way he had fundamentally redefined access to knowledge. In the university's largest lecture hall, Marcus addressed a combined audience of Princeton students and remote participants from his outreach program. Screens displayed the faces of high school students from inner-city neighborhoods across the United States, their eyes wide with awe and anticipation. Physics, Marcus began, his voice steady and confident, is a language of the universe. It doesn't care about the color of your skin, the wealth of your family, or the prestige of your school. What matters is curiosity, persistence, and courage. Every one of you has the potential to contribute to this language. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Applause filled the hall. Behind the clapping hands and smiling faces, Marcus saw the tangible impact of his work. Young minds that might have been discouraged or dismissed were now inspired, equipped, and empowered to pursue their passions. His mission to dismantle barriers in academia was no longer theoretical. It was actively reshaping the next generation of scientists. Meanwhile, Dr. Richard Coleman's downfall continued. Once a figure of authority and intimidation, he now faced the consequences of his arrogance and unethical behavior. His papers, stripped of credibility, had been formally retracted, and his reputation within the global scientific community was irreparably damaged. Invitations to conferences were rescinded, collaborations dissolved, and former allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with his tarnished name. Even in his diminished position at the community college, students and colleagues approached him with skepticism. No longer able to rely on prestige or intimidation, Coleman struggled to command respect. Attempts to lecture on advanced theories were met with polite but firm challenges from his students. The fall was complete, and there was no shortcut to recovery. Back at Princeton, Marcus continued to balance his dual roles as researcher and mentor. His outreach students began contributing original research, publishing papers co-authored with him in reputable journals. Their work on quantum computation, entanglement, and particle physics caught the attention of global research networks. For the first time, students from marginalized communities were gaining recognition for their contributions, demonstrating that talent existed everywhere. It was opportunity that had been scarce. One afternoon, Marcus received an email from the International Physics Consortium. They had invited him to speak at their annual conference in Geneva, highlighting the global impact of his outreach model. Marcus knew this was more than a personal honor. It was a platform to advocate for structural change in science education worldwide. Meanwhile, at Princeton Min, the research assistant who had first warned Marcus about Coleman was now coordinating outreach logistics. Together, they were expanding the Quantum Bridge Initiative, creating partnerships with schools in Europe, Africa, and Asia. They worked tirelessly to ensure that students, regardless of their circumstances, had access to mentors, digital laboratories, and advanced learning resources. The collaboration bore fruit in unexpected ways. Students from different continents began working together, solving problems that previously had seemed intractable. They exchanged ideas, challenged assumptions, and developed innovative solutions, proving that diversity of thought was one of the greatest assets in scientific discovery. In Geneva, Marcus delivered his keynote address. Standing before an audience of some of the most influential physicists in the world, he shared not only his scientific findings, but also his philosophy. That true innovation is born when barriers are removed and when brilliance is nurtured rather than suppressed. His story of overcoming systemic prejudice and transforming his circumstances resonated deeply, inspiring institutions to rethink how they approach talent, inclusion, and mentorship. While Marcus's career soared, he never lost sight of his roots. In Newark, he continued to mentor students personally, visiting local schools and community centers. He organized summer workshops, online seminars, and scholarship programs. Many of these students had no prior exposure to advanced science, yet under Marcus's guidance, they were designing experiments, simulating quantum systems, and even proposing solutions to unsolved problems. Dr. Coleman, on the other hand, was a cautionary tale. In interviews, he admitted his mistakes, acknowledging the arrogance that had blinded him. Yet even with contrition, he could not undo the damage he had caused, nor reclaim the respect he had once commanded. His story served as a powerful counterpoint to Marcus's, a reminder that knowledge alone is not enough, and that character, humility, and fairness are indispensable in shaping a lasting legacy. As the academic year drew to a close, Marcus stood outside the physics building at Princeton, watching students arrive for the next lecture. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From reading salvage physics books by candlelight in a small apartment to teaching at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. The obstacles he had faced were formidable, yet each challenge had strengthened his resolve. A small group of students approached him, carrying notebooks filled with calculations. "Professor Johnson," one said, "we've been inspired by your story. We've formed a study group to tackle problems that we never thought we could approach. Thank you for showing us what's possible." Marcus smiled, remembering himself at that age. "The greatest obstacle to learning," he said, "is not the difficulty of the subject, but the doubt that someone else places in your mind about whether you belong. Never let anyone convince you that you don't belong here. Your place in this universe of knowledge is earned by your curiosity, your courage, and your commitment to understanding, not by the color of your skin or the name of your school or the reputation of those around you." He watched as the students dispersed to their study sessions, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. The ripple effect of his efforts was only beginning. What had started as a single act of resilience in the face of prejudice had blossomed into a movement that could transform education, science, and opportunity for generations to come. As the sun set over Princeton, Marcus returned to his apartment, opening his laptop to review submissions from outreach students preparing for the next national competition in quantum computing. Each file represented a story of determination, talent, and hope. Each student was a testament to the principle that brilliance knows no boundaries. And somewhere in quiet of a distant office, Dr. Coleman worked alone, a shadow of a man he had once been. Across the continent, in crowded apartments, community centers, and small classrooms, students inspired by Marcus Johnson were solving problems, asking questions, and discovering the power within themselves to shape the future. Marcus leaned back, letting the weight of it all settle for a moment. His journey, from Newark to Princeton, from self-taught genius to global mentor, was proof that change begins with courage. True genius, he reflected, is not merely the mastery of knowledge, but the ability to use it to lift others, to dismantle barriers, and to rewrite the rules so that brilliance is never limited by circumstance. The night deepened and Marcus closed his laptop. Tomorrow, he would return to the classroom, the lab, and the outreach program. But tonight, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction, knowing that his fight had created something far greater than personal triumph. He had sparked a revolution of opportunity, inclusion, and excellence that would continue long after his own work was done. And as he gazed out over the quiet campus, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The universe, with all its mysteries and challenges, belonged to those brave enough to reach for it, no matter where they started.